You'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So it's like that story of the turkey and the eagle. When finally the truth began to dawn on him, that's a kind of thing he had questions about, you know. I don't know. Could that be true? I guess it finally started dawning on him. He keeps telling me I'm an eagle. Maybe I am. You know, I'm sure after a while, there's sort of a debate that's going on. So here's what the eagle told him. He said, "I'll tell you what you do. Next time the storm comes, don't act like the turkeys act. You just act. Do what an eagle would do, and see if you're an eagle or not. Just jump up here on this fence post and lock your wings like this, and see what happens. Act on it, in other words." And when he acted on it, he found out when the storm came and all the other turkeys ran in the turkey shed and the eagle jumped up on the fence post, I'm sure they all said, who do you think you are? Don't you know you can't do that? He said, yeah, but I believe I'm an eagle. And I'm going to act like it. When the wind came from the storm, it lifted him up, and all of a sudden he's up here flying with the eagle, experiencing a different kind of life because he dared to act like it was true. Does that sound like what James was saying? Act on what you hear. Now, one more illustration, and then I'm done. And this comes from Matthew's Gospel, and I think it's in chapter 15. And this is, again, a familiar story. You know, there's not very many stories in here that are not familiar to us because we've heard and read them so many times. And no, maybe it's not 15. Maybe it's 14. Oh, yeah, it's 14. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 14. And this is Jesus, and beginning with verse 22, Jesus has just fed the multitude and sent them away, and he went up into the mountain to pray. And verse 22 says, straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him to the other side while he sent the multitudes away. And when he sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. Now in verse 24 it said that the disciples are in the ship and it was tossed with waves. Tossed means, what do you think tossed means? It means buffeted and knocked around, you know. Have you ever been I don't know if you've ever been out on a boat when it's being rocked. Under the best circumstances it rocks. But imagine what it's like when the wind is bad. And when the waves, you know, they were probably a little bit scared. I would be. I don't like being in those kind of things anyway. And it was probably rocking back and forth. The water was washing into the boat and blowing in their face, and they don't know which way they're going. And probably a frightening situation, an uncomfortable situation. They are being rocked and buffeted by the waves. But it says in verse 25, in the fourth watch of the night, middle of the night, Jesus went unto them, and it says he's walking on the sea. Now they're buffeted, but he's walking on it. It's like the eagles flying up above. They're under the power of the storm, being buffeted and knocked around by it, probably experiencing a miserable time. And Jesus is on top of it. He's walking on what's buffeting them. They're having a different kind of experience, you see. They're buffeted by the storm, by the waves and the wind. That's what it says, tossed. And Jesus is walking on top of it. So, when they saw that, verse 26, when they saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled. And they said, it is a spirit. And they cried out for fear. Now, what that's really saying is that our eyes are deceiving us. We're hallucinating. This can't be real because, you know, what they were experiencing seemed very real. And it was real. But there's more than one kind of reality. You know, it depends on who you are and under whose power you are. Because Jesus, being who he is walking on top of, he's experiencing a different thing than they are. Let's put it that way. Okay, and straightway Jesus spoke to them and said, be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. Now in one way, if it weren't Jesus, if it were anybody but Jesus, in the midst of being tossed and buffeted and knocked around, to have somebody say, cheer up, that's not what we want to hear most of the time. Especially when we're having a hard situation. That generally doesn't rub us the right way. Somebody says, oh, cheer up. Well, yeah, well, easy for you to say. I'll show you cheer up. You know, that's kind of the reaction. But if it's Jesus, see, it's okay. You know, he can get away with this. He says to them, be of good cheer. They were disturbed. They were troubled. But he said, be of good cheer. It's me. It really is me. Don't be afraid. And what I like to say many times whenever I read this, if he were here today in the midst of whatever we're dealing with in our lives, we deal with all kinds of different things. We're not in a ship being tossed around, but we get tossed around by other things in life. There's other things that confront us that are just as troubling, just as worrisome, just as bothersome as this, and create just as much discomfort as this. And if Jesus came walking in here today, knowing everything that's going on in our lives, he would say the same thing to each one of us individually. And I'm saying it this way so hopefully you'll apply this to your life. He would say to you, cheer up, it's me, I'm with you, don't be afraid. Now that is an important thing to consider. He is with us. He said he'd be with us. We don't always sense that or realize it, but when we read it here, we can realize that it's true. I'm with you. Cheer up. Don't take it so hard. It's me. Don't be afraid. Now, this is interesting. This is where it gets interesting. Verse 28, Peter answered and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. Well, he said, if it's really you, tell me to come. Well, so now Jesus doesn't really have any way to answer that. What can he say? No, it's not me, don't come. It was him. So Peter said, if it's really you, bid me come. But look beyond just the words and think about what it is that Peter's saying. What he's really saying is, if what I'm seeing exhibited here, if this is really true, I want it to be true in my life too. I don't want it to just be in Jesus' life and me buffeted in the ship and experiencing this, what I'm experiencing. I want to walk like you're walking. I want to have that same life that you're having. We do too, don't we? Yes, we do. And so Jesus said, come. Not much elaboration. This is very much like what he said to the man at the pool. Do you notice that? He said, do you want to be made whole? Well then, get up and be made whole. Get up and pick up what you're lying on and walk. Peter says, if it's really you, bid me come. He says, then come. Now, just like the man at the pool, now Peter's got a choice. I'm sure all the disciples are looking at him. So you know what Peter's got to do now is, what does he have to do? Well, he could just sit there where he was, or he could act on what Jesus said. He could act on what he just heard. And so think about what he had to do now. He had to stand up on the edge of that ship and take a step off into what looked like a disaster. But he was acting on what he believed to be true. He was acting on the Word, Jesus' Word, come. And so it says, when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. Now, in verse 29, when Peter is acting on the Word and acting on what Jesus said, and his attention is focused on Jesus and the word come, the invitation to come and walk with me just like I'm walking, it said he walked on the water. He did. He did it. Peter really did do it. Now, we sometimes criticize Peter because he's always opening his mouth at inopportune times. But I'll tell you what, those other 11 didn't experience what he experienced here. He walked on the water. They just sat there. And that's what it's going to be in most of our life. Most everybody else in your life is going to just sit there. But I think, what I think is, it's worth the risk. It's worth the dare to act on what we read and experience that higher kind of life. But here's what happened. Verse 30. When he, Peter, saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and he began to sink. And he cried, saying, Lord, save me. What happened to Peter? He began to forget about Jesus and think about all the circumstances. Now that's easy to do. It's easy to get your mind off of Jesus and start thinking about all the other things going on. And what happens in that case is what happened to him. He began to sink, which is also remarkable. That he didn't. I've been to the pool with the kids a lot of times and seen everybody jump in the water, and I've never seen anybody yet begin to sink. Right? That's pretty remarkable, and they just sink. So, but listen to this, as his faith began to drain away, he began to experience something different. While he was looking at Jesus, and that was the only thing he took into account, he walked just like Jesus. But as he began to look around and consider all the other circumstances, he began to his faith began to drain away, and he began to experience what all the rest of them were experiencing. It had to do with what he was looking at and what he was acting on. Okay. Immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? That's why I know it was by his faith that he was walking, because Jesus said, why did you start to doubt? We were doing just fine, So what is the message to us? What's the encouragement to us? Well, put your attention on Jesus and just act like the things that we read in this book are true, and just act like they're true. I read something about John G. Lake one time. He was a missionary to South Africa. and he would go out to it, and that would be hard.